So welcome back to Perspective for Life as we continue discussions on relationships, such an important subject. How are you, Malik?
Hi, Ryan. How was your week?
I've had a good week, busy week, but yeah, on the go.
Anything interesting that I missed?
I don't know that always interesting things for me, to be honest with you. I'm always meeting interesting people. I'm always thinking about things that relate to, how it is that we as people think and what motivates us and all of these things. So, some interesting cases, interesting things to consider. They're busy painting at our house right now, so that's an interesting arrangement. So last night we ended up having dinner on the floor of our bedroom with the five of us. And it was
picnic.
actually
So you had a picnic.
We had a picnic, which was super fun because we ended up after that. It was a fantastic meal, and we ended up playing 20 questions, and it was fun.
Wow, 20 questions.
That was interesting.
Okay,
yeah,
maybe another podcast on that one.
On 20 questions.
Okay, so as you said, there was a lot of interesting cases, and I always wonder. I know that couples come to see you quite often, and they come at the stage, different stages in the relationship. But you see a lot of people who wonder, should I go, should I stay? And they come when they're stuck. There's a lot of conflict. It's not anymore productive conflict. It's mostly destructive. So I was hoping actually to unpack something that you have noticed from the practice as well. And the first question is really, what do you see mostly in practice that when the couples, maybe something recent or maybe there's something that it's quite interesting. It's a good example that we can use now to talk about a bit more about the conflict and definitely tie up the resentment when it comes to that stage where maybe a last stage is of some of the relationship before they break up if there's no intervention.
So you use the word resentment, and I would say to you that by the time I sit with people and resentment is clearly there, that relationship is usually on the rocks. Resentment is something that's very difficult to come back from in my experience. But that's part of why I approach things the way that I do. I feel that if people have a better understanding, again, of themselves and of the other people, they're usually inclined to be a little bit more tolerant of what the other person may have said or may have done, because they don't, again, as I mentioned in previous times, they don't ascribe an intention. When a person sort of treats the other person with disrespect, they might swear at them, they might shout at them. When the idea is that person is now treating me unfairly, when that person is treating me wrongly, and that's because they no longer respect me. I give so much, I give just about everything I can, and usually both partners feel that. They feel I'm giving. But what I'm not getting is I'm not even getting something neutral in return. I'm getting a kick in the teeth. I'm getting attacked for trying to do something good. That is when the relationships, in my opinion, are often at their worst. And that's what I see.
So what's broken in the conversation there? So I'm sure they play out somewhat sample of that in the office.
When
they describe things, right?
Yeah.
And you almost feel they're not in a same relationship because one person describes their side and the other, and it's so different that you don't know if these people are actually together when you put it. And it's interesting. So what is so different? What are you picking up in lacking in the conversation about and because if you ask them, and I'm not going to kind of drill deeper on this, they actually don't intend to hurt the partner.
I would say to you, I agree with you. I don't think that the vast majority of them are doing that intentionally. They might provoke something at times because they are so frustrated, so that they might even knowingly say something that they know is going to push this person's buttons, but it's not because they want to hurt them. It's because they want a response from them. And so what I find is when they are able to sort of unpack that a little bit, usually when they come and see me, a lot of people come and see me just to be able to have a conversation. So just so that I can sit there, because I think people recognize very, very quickly when they work with me, my intention is not to pick sides. I say this to every single person who comes to see me. I'm not your judge. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I can try and help you understand what's going on in your own thinking and your own emotions, and I can try and help you understand possibly how the other person is feeling. So I try and cultivate an understanding and empathy, because usually the people I see have been together quite a long time, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. So there's usually a lot of, sort of common ground. And when I draw back onto that, I try and almost encourage them to think back to good times. What are the good things that we've had together? And then recognize that, the person is not trying to hurt you as they are. It's not, again, intentional. And I often find that allows them, even when there is resentment, to just soften the position towards the other person. Because when there's resentment, I'm not being treated fairly, which is really the result of, you've made me angry so many times. You've treated me in ways that, again, are so unfair, are so disrespectful, are just so not right, that it's hard not to be resentful. This person who I've entrusted myself to, who I've given so much to, treats me, in such bad ways. It's very, very difficult not to, sort of pull back, be very on the defensive. And the moment there's an issue is to, sort of attack through words, through actions, and quickly withdraw again. So there's no real room for discussion or understanding or the kind of communication that's required. So again, I think what we provide is, at times, people who are coming along, we provide a safe space where they can actually share what they feel. And inevitably there's tears, because people are hurt, they're fragile. So they don't want to necessarily, as we said, have this conflict, but conflict has become the norm. And again, it's really something that has eroded a relationship to the point where it's broken. And the question is, do we continue like this, or is this the end? As I said, I never tell a person you should or you shouldn't. I will always tell a person, this is what's likely to happen, and these are the reasons. And I think that is helpful to them, because they feel that they're being given almost sort of a third eye on the situation, which then allows them to possibly even show or exercise some sort of kindness and tendency towards, empathy or forgiveness, which usually softens things tremendously. So there are times when people will leave my office and they're both crying, and you can see there's a longing to want to express kindness to this person who they've loved, who at this particular point in time, almost feels like an enemy.
So obviously resentment is more a kind of sign of close to a breakup point.
Yeah, in my experience,
it's ideally, it's really having early signs and kind of recognizing the seedlings of the resentment or the building blocks. So if we can just a little bit go back and see how can we be more sensitive to the growth of this, to the tumor that can grow into cancer through resentment. And so where are the how do we increase sensitivity and consciousness about this?
In the conversation that we had in one of our previous videos, I think it was the second one, that related to, when things are said, things can't be unsaid. And we have a tendency at times when something is said, we know it. Things have been alluded to so clearly, but we can't say the words. And the moment the word is said, it's like, well, there it is. There's no turning back. There's no going back. It's broken. I think if we can understand that words are often said in an emotional setting where there is really defense or attack, and that one can look at that and say, before resentment builds, in that, you said that, I did say it, and you know what? I was out of line. So the idea of just acknowledging, just being able to say, I said it, I'm sorry, it was in the moment. And you can say, well, you obviously said what you mean, and that's how you really feel. I always tell a person, be willing to share with the other person, that may have been how I felt in that moment. And honestly, I felt like I could kill you. But that's not what I want. And it was really the emotion, and it was everything else. And that's not to excuse it. That's not to justify it. It's not to say that when I swore at you or spoke to you in that way, that's okay. It's, I was wrong. And I'm asking you to be willing to let it go because of the other things that we share. So in essence, it's forgiveness.
So do you use emotions to put a temperature and put almost a light to explore further? Because if I'm so charged, there's something here that I really value. This is where the trigger is. I'm going to share something personally. Recently, I was looking at the words that get me really. I'm a natural accelerator of the conflict. I naturally kind of move forward. I press the gas. I'm not someone who will diffuse and kind of. I will go and I want to explore it and I won't let go. So you need someone on the other side. But also, I can take that role, right? If I recognize this and see how destructive that can be and all. But I was looking at the word, and it's funny. For me, it was, okay, so wow, who cares? And, and dismissing me is unbelievable. Like, it's not all. So after all the words that were said, and I start looking at where I actually raised my voice, where I went off and kind of went into behavior that I personally wouldn't like to, be too long in it and lose control. It was really dismissing me. It was like, I'm not visible. What you think is who cares? And that who cares?
Yeah.
And it was just a fascinatingly triggering. And I thought, why? And it's obviously you see that I'm explosive and it's not aligned with the situation at all.
As we discussed.
Something else is feeding it, right? So there's something that I kind of feel a high threat. So do you help people explore these trigger points, at least to come up, even if they're in a resentment position?
Absolutely.
To not take that into a next relationship.
What we want to go ahead and do is we want to recognize that emotions distort perspective. And perspective is in many respects everything. So when we have a look, first and foremost, what you are looking for is you trying to identify what it is in you that triggers the kind of response you don't want. So first of all, that's a willingness to check myself. That's a sensitivity to the situation and a self-awareness of what triggers me. So think about it. When you're being dismissed, and I hear this often, it's, I'm not heard. It's as if my opinion doesn't count. Well, here's the deal. And this is why it's so important to distinguish between the value of the individual and the value of the actual position or perspective held. I so emphasize this. I value my wife. I love my wife. I will die for my wife. But there are times we will disagree on things, and I can come across as dismissive. I can come across as, I said nothing, man. What you worried about? My intention there is for her not to worry. My intention is not to tell her, got no clue. But it can easily come across if the thing that I'm saying sounds as like your opinion is no good, and that reflects on you because you must be no good. Assumption.
I'm going to add something because so we're going to try to unpack that. No, in the yes and no, what you just said, when I hear that, my care for it comes from the values. It's attached to me.
Correct.
So dismissing that's not important means I actually care about wrong things or values are misplaced, correct, which now I find far bigger than
100%.
So you're kind of discounting my feelings because they're based on wrong value, and I go, okay, this is,
you extrapolate.
So now it's going further. It's actually going for targeting a bit more of my individual. Like, you sound now smarter and better than me,
and that's exactly.
And now
the point.
we're going into that almost. I regress immediately. I feel
I've made a judgment in many respects from your perspective. And as we said yesterday, I said this always, every time there's a difference of opinion, it's going to be personal. And
it is personal.
People don't see that often.
Absolutely.
Again, the detail is one thing. And when I distinguish that, because I can see it like that, there are things that, again, people might say about me, I just genuinely, I don't take it personally. I can think they're right. I can think they're wrong. I might agree or disagree with what they're saying. But unless that person is somebody who I value their opinion, not only them, because they might be seeing something I'm not seeing, right? Then I will say, well, I need to check on that. But if I know, somebody apparently said of me recently that I had a couple of derogatory things to say. I've never met them. So for me, it was like, okay,
maybe they were not talking about you.
You know, no, seriously, it was, and I chuckled because the person who was telling me, you know, knows me really well, and they were laughing, and it was one of those situations where it's like, well, if I was worried about, you know, somehow I've taken that personally, and somehow somebody has a bad idea, but I could stew over that. I could be wondering why, what. It's honestly, really, I detach what that person thinks from what I know. Now, I want to be sensitive, not to dismiss every single thing that's negatively spoken about me. I digress there slightly. I bring it back again. The moment we have a difference of opinion, it is personal. And the moment it's personal, there is a question of
it's
value.
more personal when from the person that
who's supposed to know you and love you.
Or just should be having more patience, more curiosity, and kind of be more careful around your vulnerability, because we obviously offer them our vulnerability, and we hope by you knowing us, I mean, they know us so well, that they will not exploit this vulnerability. They will not they will not weaponize themselves by what we have shared. And so rather than use it to explore further and, you know, so contextualize better. But again, we're busy, you know, and life happens, and then I come with something and the timing could be off. So there's many things that influence bad answer.
Many things.
Less favorable answer, that more triggering comments. But that acknowledging that. So it's funny, I'm going to bring something. So we were having conversations, and then usual kind of categorical answers, which never really help in conversation. Always, never, ever, which realistically cannot be used, really. No one always, ever, never. And so I stopped and I said, I'm not going to comment on that. I'm just going to ask, how is this now helping conversation? Because I just want to repeat what we were talking about. When you use ever, never, not sure what, should I now linger around that and then, or should we go back? How do we go back on the conversation? I literally stop and say, I honestly have sincere curiosity. I'm not interested. Like, how is this? How that choice of words? Were you aware? I actually was really looking. Were you aware of this word that you just used? Does it work? Will it help? And it was funny that the moment I said that, it was completely changed. Like, okay, no, I didn't mean that. I actually didn't mean that at all. What I meant. So I think it was amazing. The moment I stopped and gave the chance that we can stop at any point. I mean, I can be completely out of my mind, and I can literally say, wait, why am I shouting? What's the point of this shouting? It's interesting how hard that is at certain points.
It can be extremely difficult.
But the choice of words, we kind of get stuck without, again, that word curiosity. But going back on resentment, really, you said that when it's really for a while there, it's very hard to repair. So maybe we can learn from it. I'm guessing that's quite important when they come to you with that stage, and at least they cannot carry this forward in whatever they are moving forward into.
Or they can't. That's a given.
Or repair to the friend, kind of some level of respect, especially if they share children. I'm guessing that's what we should work toward. But let's say the couples who are sensing stuckness, the strategy they've been using is just not taking anywhere. Yep. They expected more.
There's your expectation.
The relationship was supposed to be lovely, not this.
There's your expectation. It's costing them. It's conflict. Those are the three things we discussed before. So in those situations where there is resentment, in my experience, the only thing that allows people who have reached that level is when there is an ownership of, I have dealt with you wrongly and I was wrong, and I'm asking you in many respects to give me another chance. So when I consider relationships, preparing for safe relationships, caring for safe relationships, or repairing safe relationships back to safety, that is that section where there has to be an ownership of whether I intentionally did it or unintentionally did it. I acknowledge I was the cause of your pain, and for that I am sorry. And if I've done that in a way, I'm asking you, as tough as this is, I'm asking you not to hold it against me and give me the freedom to go ahead and move on. In essence, I'm asking you to accept that what's behind is behind, not be happy with what is behind. I totally get that what's behind hurt. I don't want to dismiss it. I don't want to downplay it. I don't want to pretend it never happened. I want to acknowledge it. I want to own it. And in many respects, I am requesting that you give me another opportunity when in many respects, I probably don't deserve it. That attitude, if mutual, is likely to at least allow for a cautious moving forward. So I think let's maybe carry over into another discussion. What would you take away from this in terms of the conflict, resentment? We covered a couple of things. What's something that you would think that could be helpful to couples?
So just increasing awareness, honestly, and creating more conscious partnership for me is very important. I think the even discussing resentment itself and how dangerous it is for every relationship, and reminding us to keep a watchful eye on certain things, especially internally. Now, you may not be sharing, but recently someone shared really openly, okay, not with his wife, I could punch her. I could punch her. I just left house. So they had a conflict. It was not even explosive conflict. It was one of those, yet another one. That he could play out how it's going to end up anyway. So he left the house and he literally said, I could punch her. I mean, it was awful to hear this. This is a person you share such a close relationship. You swear this is the person you want to spend your life. And then you come to this point. And so just discussing, honestly, for me, this is valuable. Just sharing, how do you see resentment? Let's think about it. And getting to know partner. Did they ever think about it? No, not making it into therapeutic session, but really just saying, okay, let's look at it. Or even, I find it a little bit more playfulness. Very often I watch a movie, right? And then I use something that if you can't express it very often, we can't really, what you talk about requires skills as well, the self-revelation. But using stories that are told, using something that's obviously well developed in front of us, and you can use it as a trigger point. So I think these kind of conversations and just introducing language, and that just initial awareness can be a way to recognize where we are and putting up fingers on the pulse.
Which at the end of the day is, again, we need to, if we're going to resolve anything, we need to identify the actual problems, understand those problems, because without an accurate assessment of what's really in play and understanding how it's in play, the likelihood is we are not going to formulate a reliable solution. So I would say to you that even the things we've just discussed right now, we recognize there are so many little angles and variations, which is why we could spend all of our time discussing relationships and this example, that example, which is why when we bring it down, what I try and do is always bring it down to what are the basic principles, because once we understand those things, that's easier to communicate rather than the detail of this or that. So principally, let's recognize resentment. By the time you get there, the relationship is in big, big trouble, and it requires a tremendous amount of, care and attention if one is going to try and put that together. So I'm of the opinion if things can be resolved, that's always first prize. So I'm going to leave it at that, and we can pick up on further relationship things. Thank you.
Ryan.